Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, the price action, what's been going on most recently with the volatility that we've seen with the FOMC meeting yesterday, what this means going further forward. As I get into the video, you know what to do. Smash that like button. I do appreciate that. Let's get right into it. So Bitcoin paired up with USDT on the hourly chart. Binance is our data source. Now, for the analysis of what we've been doing and talking about for the last probably week or so was this kind of ABC structure to the upside like this. Okay, now we obviously broke down quite a bit yesterday. Still technically a valid wave count would be this, coming down to this recent low down here and then moving on up. However, I think so much time has passed since this low point down here that actually we're probably not seeing that. So let's actually break this down a little bit further and take a look at what's been going on outside of this. Okay, so at the moment we actually have these kind of structures coming in here. So I just want to kind of reflect on this, actually potentially pulling back a little bit further. And we have the dashed line at the bottom here at $20,000. Okay, so we want to talk about where the next levels are. Where's the next key levels of support, right? So at the bottom down here, this yellow box area, this is the demand zone that's actually of interest to me. So I'm just going to mark this up because this is actually holding quite well, this little area of demand at the bottom here. So you can kind of see all these wicks and this activity down here, specifically this one here, right? And we've come back down, we just went into it and we pushed back up again. It's not exactly the right width. If I pull that down here, you can see that this double bottom that we just had with this wick about an hour ago, this is about 12 o'clock UTC, you can see was also over here. And I could pull this down even further if I wanted to, but I don't want it to be too big. I'm going to leave it there for now. You can see that we're moving up a little bit here. And this is because we've actually had a pretty decent correction today so far. So you're naturally going to see these kind of moves to the upside a little bit. So what we're looking out for here is a couple of things. Now, the obvious, and it is a pretty obvious one to me anyway, is that we are going into these lower lows. I'm going to move that over here. And lower highs, right? So if I draw these on and snap it to there for now and move that down over this side, you can see that we are kind of coming in here with these lower lows and lower highs coming in, right? And we can kind of see these things. Now, what's important about this is these tend to break upwards, whereas when you're going into higher highs and higher lows, they break downwards. So we do think there's going to be some kind of move to the upside here. I just don't think we're necessarily there just yet. So I'm looking at this at the moment now, with the new data that we had from yesterday, thinking, okay, well, is this actually a structured move like this? And then we've got to come back down like so, okay? And probably just breach that $20,000 level, maybe even come down as low as this one, which we're talking about this morning at 19,600 to 19,700. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the fibs on there, see what goes on with the Fibonacci retracement tool, see what numbers we kind of get to on this. On the Binance data source. So here's actually showing us at 19,964. So actually really just a double bottom with the wick over here on the 28th of October, so that low. So that would be an interesting one. If it's a double bottom, then we can move on up. But I still think this area is of interest, and I'll tell you why. This area down here is an area that we were finding as resistance, okay? So this was previously, if I label this up, a supply zone, okay? So think of it as a resistance, but I like to think of it as supply. This is where the sellers were coming in, okay? They were coming in here. Then, of course, what we ended up doing is we broke through it, okay? So we pushed all the way through it. Okay, and then we haven't come back down to see whether this supply area has become a demand area. So as we kind of think about breaking down potentially, this area is of interest to me in the same way that $20,000 was of interest to everyone back in early 2021, right? So just kind of reflect on these things. I do think this is going to be an interesting point. Now, if we do pull down here, we are talking about the 1.382. Not talking about going into a 1.618, even though we haven't got a structure that would support such a move going down to the 1.618. It's probably worth noting that even if it does, I don't think it's actually that important. What I do think is likely to occur here, though, is that we could see a significant surge to the downside, just losing the 20K support level and then breaking down. Not probable, but there's a scenario where that could play out. Okay, so for now, I'm going to leave it as in we just come down, we double bottom here. We've got very, very close to it right down here. As you can see, at 12 o'clock, we came down to a low of 20,031. So this could be a good point for reversal. Now, what I do want to kind of focus in on, though, is the subwave count of this C wave. If we start thinking about this high point and this low point down here, the bounce up and what that might mean going forward. So if I take this Fibonacci retracement tool and I move this over to our bounce high here. Okay, and I'm going to have to zoom in just to see if we get that exactly where I need it. It's a little bit on the lower side, so let's go ahead and pull that in. And I think about there, that's it. Okay, and then here you can see the 1-to-1 does come down to 19,657. Okay, so that would be an interesting structure where our internal wave count would be 1, 2, and 3 coming down here, which would mean a slight overextension on the macro, but would actually leave a micro count that would indicate that move to the downside. So there's some volatility to be expected, okay? Now, with this, we are looking at that progression to the downside is no guarantee. I think the most probable scenario is that we've already finished the C wave and we rally, but I want to be aware, or should make everyone aware that it's possible that actually there's very little buying activity occurring at the moment, and as a result, that could lead into more downside price action. So as I bring up our wallet counts, you can kind of see that the sharks are dumping their positions rapidly. You can see that even the whales are coming out of their positions, the krakens slightly fluctuating. So the only people who are really buying right now happens to be the shrimp-sized players, right? The basically anyone lower than 1 Bitcoin, they're buying, whereas everyone else seems to be not so much backing it. And this is also noticeable within the inflows and the outflows on exchanges, with yesterday being slightly more in the way of inflows than outflows. 36,000 go on, 32,000 come off. The day before, 40,000 goes on, 34,000 comes off. The day before that, 34,000 on, 30,000 off, right? So we're not seeing demand coming in here. All we are seeing are people willing to sell their Bitcoin, not necessarily buy it. So the upward price action is going to be quite hard. That being said, that's as it stands right now, and we might see some volatility that actually takes those wicks up higher because it's an unexpected move. As we were talking about in the stream this morning on Twitch, the sentiment was to go long. So naturally, what do you see? The price goes down. Right now, imagine that everyone's kind of feeling a little bit on the shorter side and wanting to short the market. So let's go ahead and aggregate this up into the 15 minutes. And here you can see with 60%, just short of 60% of people going short on the market. So we're going to see the price go up, right? It's basically liquidating whatever the majority think. Okay, so just be aware that the market is going to be experiencing some volatility. And once we get stable, we might start to see some interesting positions. Now, essentially, considering our stochastic RSI, this would have been a really interesting entry, but I don't think we're necessarily there just yet. I think we're going to have to lose this area, and I still think we've got some momentum to the downside here that could see us finish off this C wave a little bit lower. Okay, so just watch out for that. I think they're going to liquidate some short positions and then push the price down even further as people start to feel a little bit more bullish. Now on the 4-hour chart, if it wants to load up, come on. Let's get these calculations in there. We've got plenty of progression to the upside, but I think we still have that room to kind of correct down before we move on up. And it's the same story with the 8-hour. We're right down here and we've got lots of progression. The daily chart just coming down from that overbought area and has a long way to go yet. And the same with the weekly. So I think essentially what we're looking for here is a bit of a move to the downside, finishing off some kind of smaller wave count. But I do think it's possible that we're not going to fully go down to this gap that's got to be filled, in my opinion, but I don't think we're going to go all the way there. And then I think we're going to start moving on up. I think we're going to have a reasonable 3-wave structure that basically takes that 4 and 8-hour structures back to overbought area. And we'll probably break out of that structure a little bit as well. So we've got this kind of big 3-wave structured move coming down here, for example, and it could be perceived in multiple different ways. But I think that essentially we're going to go up. We're going to go up slightly higher and then pull back to the downside. One of the things I think is probably worth noting is on the daily chart. If I bring this in, you can see that we already broke out of this triangular wedge here. We're finding that local top at the moment, and we could break on down to my demand zone that I have scoped out down here at 16,300 to 16,700. So there's a lot of areas of thought process going on in here. We also have those smaller areas inside where we are right now. Do expect some volatility. I don't think we've necessarily finished this structure to move out of here just yet, but when we have, I think we are going to be heading down into the new lower lows, and I think that's really where the value is going to be added for Bitcoin. But let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Other than that, guys, I want to leave this video right there. If you did find it useful and informative, hit the like button. I do appreciate that. If you happen to be new to the channel, subscribe, tap the bell, select all the notifications, and don't forget to join us down in Discord. Link is in the description below. Guys, until the next one, have a fantastic day.